We are living in 1968. You guys, a TikTok ban. It's finally happened. Crackdown on college campuses. Going nuts over there in Columbia. Columbia University. We have not only a forced sale of that, we have what else do we have on here? A foreign aid bill. It went through to perpetuate wars in Israel, in Ukraine, and now Taiwan. You guys, things are even worse now, though, than 1968. Before I get into it, I got so much caffeine and Taylor Swift songs flowing through my veins. You guys, Taylor Swift is fire. Why am I always the last one to the party? She has bangers. I'm not talking about the pop stuff either. I'm talking about like her real deep melodic emo stuff is just so good for this breakup I'm going through. What's popping? Brian's looking at me like he's ready to quit. Hey, I don't care. Follow me, unsubscribe. I don't give a. I just realized you're feeding off of this. So I'm not. None of this was being transmitted.
No, it was.
Oh, okay. Got it. Perfect. Sorry, guys. I thought my rant was lost. You guys, we're going to go through why the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment have never been closer to being completely null and void in this country. I know that every generation says that freedom is under attack. Freedom is literally a bipartisan afterthought at this point, okay? So it finally happened. The ban of TikTok coincided literally when it rains, it pours, you guys. The TikTok ban coincided almost the exact hour that the foreign aid bill was passed the Senate with flying colors and was signed into law by Biden. That sends $91 billion, $60 billion of it. By the way, all the money stays here, right? We know this by now. All the money just stays here and gets sent to weapons companies. That's exactly how it happens. And they're on TV admitting that. The Secretary of Defense is like, no, this is good for, it's good for workers. Yeah, the people that work for weapons companies get to keep their jobs. Oh, by the way, how much money did you receive for your reelection campaign? Huh? I mean, there's no telling. Our government is kept industries are when they've been captured industries is the term I'm looking for. Our government is captured by the weapons industry, by the Israel lobby, by many different lobbying groups that have to do with war, with death, with weapons of war, and with perpetual foreign interference. That's just what it is. Okay. So Israel's getting another like 15 to 20 billion. Ukraine and the weapons manufacturers are getting 60 billion. And then they're parceling off another 25 or so for Taiwan to ramp up hostilities against China, even though China doesn't want the smoke. They're like, what are you doing, guys? What are you doing? Our economy's finally doing good again. Why are you? We don't want the funk. Countries don't want the smoke. The only people want to sit back now. This is not 1965. This is not 1945. This is not 1925. Countries don't want imperial acquisitions anymore, for the most part. Okay, even dictatorships, even the worst authoritarian regimes you can think of, North Korea, right? They don't want the funk. They want to maintain their little hermit kingdoms. And this is the same with Iran. This is the same with China. This is the same as Russia. They want to make business. They want to do business. And yes, Russia did a mean thing by invading Ukraine. But let's look at the facts. 40 nations now, 40 different nations are talking about breaking off of the US dollar and doing business with Russia. If Putin was really the next Adolf Hitler, as the news has made him out to be for the last 2.5 years, would over 40 developing nations, including the BRICS nations, India, China, Brazil, would they want to be doing trade? Would they want to be increasing trade with a guy that's threatening to take over the world? Use your logic here. That don't matter, though. Okay? So, but what we're going to talk about really today, the biggest issue facing our country, besides maybe this spy bill, the FISA bill, By the way, the FISA bill used to spy on Trump's campaign. We know this, by the way. This was rolled into the foreign aid package. But before we even get to that, let's talk about the TikTok ban or forced sale. So I'm shocked that this went through. They've been talking about this for like 3 years now. Okay. I didn't think there was any way that this was going to pass the House, much less the Senate. It passed, and Biden signed it into law. This forces a sale within a year. This forces a divestment by ByteDance, which is the majority Chinese ownership. This forces their sale within a year, or it's going to be removed. Now, thank God for courts, right? Because they're suing, and they said they expect they expect to win. This is what they expect. Now, I don't know who they think they're dealing with. You're not dealing with a democracy in America, certainly. Now, thank God for the Supreme Courts. Thank God for Trump stacking the Supreme Court with First Amendment judges. But I don't even know at this point. I can't even call it, because the elected representatives do not care about the Bill of Rights. They do not care at all about free speech. In fact, they think it's a negative. They do not want competition of thought. Not that politicians ever did. It doesn't matter what they say about democracy or free speech. Most politicians don't want opposition to what they think and say and do, right? But it's literally under attack. 170 million users. TikTok is the most used social media app by far. And by the way, we're pulling for it because we're killing it on there. 350K. The Connect is on TikTok, murdering it. Instagram, suck it. Huh? Facebook, what is that? What's the other one? Snapchat. Snapchat is doing so bad it had to rebrand. Have you seen the new branding, the new billboards for Snapchat? It's we're not social media, we're Snapchat. TikTok is eating their lunch. And of course, a big thing that TikTok does well, of course, it damages, of course, it makes half the population brain dead by watching TikTok dances. Yes, that is a bad thing. But kids are also, getting brain dead from vaping and listening to modern rap and eating poorly and having no direction and, smoking fentanyl like that. There's plenty of other things that are killing the brains of the youth than TikTok videos, right? That's just what they watch as they're destroying their lives, okay? In real time, they're watching TikTok. TikTok is what people want. The market is spoken, right? There's all these other choices. TikTok is the most effective besides YouTube. Shout out to our YouTube page. Make sure to like and subscribe, by the way, you guys, to the Johnny Mitchell page, what you're watching now. And of course, if you're not a fan of the Connect, that's okay. We got plenty of those. Right? Page is doing very well. But besides YouTube and YouTube Shorts, no other genuine social media app is reaching as many people. And instantly, right? X is good for sharing information. And now, Elon Musk is trying to push video on there. But it doesn't shake a stick to what TikTok is doing. And it's not just among the youth now. Boomers and millennials are also on TikTok, right? I personally am not. I just have my guy running it. But it's a great tool to expose what's going on in Gaza. It's a great tool to expose what's going on in the rest of the world that politicians and power structures don't want you seeing. So clearly this is a threat. When you have 170 million eyeballs, and this is just in America, that's almost half of America. I believe there's about 320, 350 million people in America. Nearly half are on TikTok just in America. What you have now is a problem for politicians. You got a serious problem. And it just goes back to what's going on the East Coast in New York City, right? You see the protests that are rocking the power structure are as ferocious. The demonstrations against the bombing of Gaza are as ferocious as anything that we saw during Vietnam, right? Now, perhaps there's more of a youth movement going on right now compared to Vietnam when it kind of grew out of, you had the Black Panthers, you had, all these leftist movements, you had Mothers Movement, right? Now it seems to be most heavily concentrated, at least in America, on college campuses amongst the youth, but really all over the world, there are as much protests, and they happened way faster than at the beginning of the Vietnam War. You see this massive resistance to American imperialism and to, imperialism in general, which is really exposing what's happening. Authoritarian countries don't want the smoke. This gets back to what I was saying. They want to trade, they want to do business, and they want to hang on to their grip on power, right? The people that want problems are the West. Israel, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, everybody that backed this new weapons package, completely ignoring their role in it. So, look, you guys, it's the beginning of the end of the empire, and governments don't behave this way, right? They do not pass things like a ban on TikTok. They do not extend the FISA bill that effectively allows warrantless spying on American citizens. We're going to get into that in a little bit. They don't do these things unless they feel that the power structure, their base of maintaining power, is threatened. And that's what's going on. It is a wild times out there, Bubbas. Not only that, just like the 60s and the 70s, inflation is back. The economy is on the brink. And now, of course, what we have now that we didn't have back then is crippling debt. National debt that we couldn't pay back with 5,000 years of austerity, right? It's a problem. And thank God for Bitcoin. Thank God for crypto. Thank God for Taylor Swift, right? And of course, Bernie Sanders, the only one to stand up. Really, I mean, there was a handful of Republicans. By the way, Johnson, the so-called Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, boy, did he luck out. And Trump cucked. Trump cucked for Mike Johnson. This is probably the most distressing part about this whole bill passing, is the fact that Donald Trump, who was drain the swamp all this time, was sticking by his principles, saying, America first, we're not giving money to NATO and Ukraine, and Israel's got to end its war, and we are not going to be the ones giving money to the military-industrial complex. He blinked. He finally, he's just human, and he's feeling the heat. He's got four criminal trials that he's facing. He's literally on trial for felonies right now in criminal court. He's spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a year. I mean, he's feeling the pressure, and he finally jumped. And I don't know if somebody got to him in the government or in the lobbyists clearly have been nipping at his heels. And he finally dog whistled to Mike Johnson and said, do what you got to do. And he got enough Republicans behind him to where they passed this thing. And so, these are captured people. They're paid off. Their speeches are probably written by AIPAC. So, this is what we have. 60%, this is according to a recent poll, 60% of people want to be out of foreign intervention. They think we either give too much money to Ukraine or they want the wars to be done completely. And that includes in Israel. And they don't care. So when when a majority of people want their representatives to do one thing and those representatives do another, that ceases to be a democracy. That's just the definition of it, right? That's literally just right there. You have an oligarchy at work. You have an autocracy, quite frankly. So not only is TikTok now effectively being forced to sell, assuming that their appeals don't win, right? Not only is that happening, now you have an extension of the FISA bill. Now, the FISA bill is a warrantless search mechanism that allows spying on foreigners. Okay. Now pay attention to this. It allows spying on foreigners that are active inside of the United States, but it also allows spying and warrantless wiretapping on those foreigners if they're contacting Americans. So in other words, if you were Russian and you're contacting me, right, and they've got a warrant, or excuse me, they've got a wiretap on you and you call me, I pick up the phone, I am now allowed to be spied on without a warrant in perpetuity under this FISA bill. And that's exactly what they used. The Obama campaign, the Obama administration used to spy on Trump's campaign back when he was running in 2015, right? And probably again in 2020. So here you go right there. It's not, that's as plain as day. That's how they use it. They don't use it to get terrorists. Maybe they do, but that's incidental, right? They use it to spy on Americans. They use it to spy on Americans that don't agree with the oligarchy, that don't agree with the plutocracy, the autocracy, a bunch of crossy, right? A bunch of ocracy. This is wild. So what do we do and where do we go? Where do you go from here? Like, it's only going to get worse. They're only going to be printing more money. They're only going to keep going down this road of self-destruction. I don't see any other way. We're trying to get Colonel Douglas McGregor on here. I've never seen him. If you're a fan of this guy, he is a former, 5-star general in the military, served for 40 years. He's the one that's been exposing the truth about the military-industrial complex, Ukraine, Israel, and the swamp in Washington. I've never seen him so distressed as when this bill passed last night. I mean, the guy's just given up hope. So what do you do? Like that, this has me thinking, like, if I got to leave, if I actually have to leave the U.S. because taxes are going to go up, the economy is going to go down, and it's not going to affect hustlers like me. I'm always going to get money, as you should put your mind to doing. But of course, I don't want to. Why am I going to pay taxes to evil men? Why am I going to pay taxes to thugs? You know, my shrink yesterday, my new therapist, who I love, by the way, this guy's amazing. He told, I gave him all my background and my criminal history. He said, yeah, you might be like an 18% sociopath. He said, I have 18% sociopath in me because I break laws. Hey, guess what, buddy? If breaking laws means not paying these pigs, these war pigs in Congress to go bomb and kill thousands of innocent people overseas in wars that don't defend us, then yeah, call me a criminal, dude. So where do I go? Where do we go? Where do people that have given up? I mean, now, do I be a patriot and do I stay and fight with my voice? I don't know. I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? I don't want to complain over, the airways, right? I was talking about Ireland. I love Ireland. I hate the weather though, but I love Ireland. Not only does Ireland have low taxes, right? It does not march. Its politics do not march in lockstep with Israel, the United States, England. And not only that, they're completely disentangling themselves from the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is half free now. Northern Ireland's half free. Yeah. We've been fighting against the Brits since 1916 for 100 plus years. We've been trying to get our freedom. So, these guys really, it's a dope country, There's a lot of upside to it. They speak English. They've got amazing culture. Women, horrendous, truly disgusting looking barn animals. But hey, it makes it easier to stay faithful. You know what I mean? If you meet a 6 in Ireland, you're like, hey, I'm settling down with you, baby. You're the best they got on this rock, So maybe that's an option, but where do you go in the English-speaking world that has any semblance of freedom? Where do you go? I can be spied on without a warrant in the United Kingdom, just like I can be spied on without a warrant in the United States. Money printing, government largesse, economic recession, political imperialism, runaway, soon to be runaway inflation. These problems exist in almost the entirety of the West and Israel, of course. But what am I going to move to Israel? Of course not. I mean, the most up and coming nations, right? The nations that are the most free, have the lowest tax base, are the safest, have the lowest crime rates, are like in Asia. What am I going to move to Singapore? What are you out of your effing mind? What am I going to get caned? Am I going to get 40 lashes because I accidentally spit on the sidewalk? I don't think so. So what is it? It just makes it tough. What other democracy or quasi-democracy can an English speaker live in that isn't in the East? I don't want to live in the East. Now, my producer Brian said New Zealand. Yeah, I don't want to go all the way down to New Zealand. And by the way, we saw the way that Australia and New Zealand behaved under COVID. Wow. That had a lot of remnants of Nazi Germany in that. They were arresting people in Australia for sitting by the beach. That's how draconian that got. So you see how governments, you have to judge governments also by how they behave under pandemic or emergency times, right? Now, what the United States has that these other Western countries do not have, that the government do not dare mess with, are gun rights. The Second Amendment, right? Now, obviously, this has a lot of repercussions, of course, in the homicide rate, in the school shooting rate. Although there's a huge corollary in the medicine that we've been giving children for the last 30 years for mental illness and the rise in school shooting. But what we have that European countries and places like Australia and New Zealand do not have are gun rights that kept us during the pandemic from completely turning into places like Australia, where you could get hauled off to jail for walking down the street without a mask on, right? Places like Germany that turned into 1935 Nazism again for people that were protesting lockdowns. That is one thing that kind of remains immutable in America when it comes to the Bill of Rights, right? So, I mean, look, Texas and the South prevented us, the rest of the country, from falling into what was truly autocracy and totalitarianism during the pandemic. But man, I don't know. You never know what could happen. Now, back to the TikTok ban, by the way. By the way, we all know that this is just a money grab, too, by companies like Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Connelly of the show Entourage is jockeying to buy TikTok. No, Kevin, what did I say? Kevin who? Kevin from the Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. Guys like him are jockeying, frothing at the mouth for this TikTok ban because they're going to jump in and offer to buy it for like 20% of its value. So make no mistake, too, this is a money play at the end of the day, right? This bill is backed by Facebook. This is backed by other Silicon Valley behemoths. They're backing this TikTok ban because they want to take out the competition. So what you see is a disappearance of capitalism. You see the more that this country evolves or devolves, right? And the more that democracy dies, the more you see capitalism dying. It's the thing that the commies and the socialists don't get is you cannot have democracy when you see capitalism and the free market dying is when you see an encroachment of fascism, right? Or autocracy. They don't see the corollary. They see it as being separate things, and it's not. So you have this thing with TikTok. And by the way, Senator Markley stood up and he said, American companies are doing the same thing. What he meant by that was data collection. Okay? They claim that the Chinese are using TikTok as a psyop, that ByteDance is feeding the information that they collect on TikTok to the Chinese government. Hey, guess what, stupid? The Chinese government can literally go on the open market and buy Americans' data on the free market legally. They don't have to go through the subterfuge of setting up, putting billions of dollars into a startup to get your information. Every single company, Google, you don't think Google knows everything you're saying and thinking right now? How stupid do they think we are? Every single company. I mean, I go to buy these little packets, these sodium packets for my water that I drink every morning. And they say, do you allow cookies? Sure, here you go. Click yes on cookies. They're selling my information to China. Data is the biggest business in the world. The biggest data is the new gold, right? As they say. Everybody, I can go, if I got enough money, I can go buy your info right now. There's a way to get you out there in YouTube land watching this podcast. I can go get your information. So that doesn't fly at all. That excuse doesn't fly. It's twofold. The TikTok ban is twofold. It's an assault on free speech, and it's cracking down on the 170 million Americans that use it and learn stuff from it and learn and see what's going on in places like Israel and Ukraine and the protests, right? And the same way, it's not just, supposed left-leaning causes, although I hate that, right? Because I'm not on the left at all, right? But I abhor everything that's happening and our interests align sometimes. It's everything that the power structure is doing, they want to obfuscate. They want you watching MSNBC or Fox, but not even really Fox. Fox is the third choice. They want you watching Rachel Maddow, and then they want you going over to CNN and then Fox just to wash it down with, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they do. Once the boomers are gone, and I cannot understate how good it is when they go, there will be nothing that the power structure can do. The internet and cryptocurrency are gifts from God. Okay? And there is nothing they can do to stop mankind from going to God and from freedom, right? Now, of course, yeah, there's a whole bunch of problems with people being on their phones all the time. I don't know what to do about that, except to live my own life and try to be as free from the addictiveness of social media and staring at my phone as possible. But the universe demands balance. The universe demands chaos and it demands balance. So on balance, I think TikTok might be a positive for the freedom of information it provides and the cracking of the monopolies of which are the big three, legacy media that is entrenched with the CIA and with the government, right? CNN is effectively a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party, of the legacy Democrat Party, certainly not Bernie Sanders, right? Or RFK when he was running as a Democrat, right? He's an independent now, but it's effectively state media, right? It's the Chinese Communist Party news before America. And that's all going away. My show, The Connect, I get episodes that are bigger than primetime MSNBC news. Flex. But look, it's going to be rough getting there, guys. It is going to be rough getting there. So it's assault on free speech, and then it's just business. It's businessmen and lobbyists who have bought off our politicians, right, and want to buy TikTok for pennies on the dollar. And it looks like it's going to happen to it. Man, I cannot tell you how right Donald Trump was to put the people in the Supreme Court that he did. But if they knock it down, and if the appeal wins, that's the only thing that will stop it from either getting sold or getting banned. And I don't know what that's going to do to the algorithm. If the appeal gets knocked down in court and they are forced to sell it, look, TikTok's still going to be around, right? It's the brand. You know what I'm saying? So unless a maverick like Elon Musk puts in a bid for it and actually wins it, but I don't think he's going to do that. I mean, look, he had a hard enough time with Twitter. So short of, and I don't even know if he has the money right now. Tesla's stock is down like 75% from its highs. Goodbye, by the way. Go in and buy Tesla. It's at 140 right now. Down from its high of like 450. So there's room. So short of that, it's going to be an American company. They're going to keep the brand. But I don't know what that's going to do to the algorithm, right? Like, is it going to become like the YouTube algorithm or the Instagram algorithm, where it's going to really heavily censored content that's going to be taken down for controversial reasons? I don't know, right? And by the way, I love YouTube. If you're watching this, YouTube monitors, I'm very grateful for YouTube. But again, it's not a social media app, right? We're talking about, the competition between Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and X, right? But X is an outlier. So moving on, you have the foreign aid bill, right? I mean, it is coming down, people. Not a peep out of anybody in Congress about where $90 billion comes from. These people are so corrupt and so stupid that they think $90 billion in printed money that goes to weapons manufacturers is good for the economy. Where do you think that money comes from? It comes from taxes. And guess what? A month from now, when the economy is officially in recession, it's going to come from printing money, from borrowing money from the Fed in an impossible spiral and an impossible debt spiral that's going to turn into hyperinflation. It doesn't do any good. It's not like a company, a private company, is offering a service that another country wants to buy in a fair and free exchange that helps them and it brings money to us. But that's counted in the economy. That's counted in the GDP. Printing money and borrowing it from the Fed and stealing it from taxpayers and giving it to no bid weapons manufacturers, they actually have the nerve to count that in the gross domestic product. Like that's trade, like that's a win. It's not a win. It's not a win. That just goes, it lines the lobbyists, the politicians, and the stockholders of the weapons companies. It lines their pockets. And yes, it employs a few people. It employs a couple thousand people for a few years. And then now we just have more debt. It's a loss, right? It's crazy. You need business people running the government. But man, Trump cucked. I can't believe he did that. Trump cucked. That should have been the name of this episode. Trump cucked. He blinked. And that's how much influence he has, by the way. He basically told Johnson to go ahead and move this bill through, and the Republicans got in line with him. That's why they're so terrified that he's going to win. They are so terrified. And of course, you don't hear anything about this from RFK. Where is he? Like, there's no leadership. Nobody is coming to the rescue. Nobody. Yeah, it's wild. So money to Taiwan to cause more beef with China, right? Even though China's like, hey, man, we just pulled out of a recession. Our economy's finally growing. Like, what are you guys doing? Countries like China, they're like, what's your obsession with us? Iran is like, hey, man, we're just over here like being a theocracy. We're over here just being, running our country based off the Quran. yes, we don't allow women out without burqa. We're just like trying to do our own thing. We don't want what you guys are. We don't want what you're selling. You know what I mean? America's always banging on the door, trying to sell Western style democracy. Well, this is the guys they use. It's really all just a money grab, but they don't want the encyclopedia that you're knocking on my door trying to sell. Get out of here with that. America behaves like Jehovah's Witnesses. You're always knocking on the door during dinner time. I don't want it. We're fine over here. And yes, we shoot off rockets. What are we supposed to do? So it's pretty insane. But the FISA bill, yeah, I mean, this is they're going to spy on Trump's campaign again. I mean, this guy can't even get in any more trouble. I don't know what other secrets they're going to bring in or what other charges they can bring up against this guy, right? So it's hard times, man. It is hard times. And is there any good news? Not really. The good news, if you're sitting on cash, is that you can use this opportunity. You can basically bet that once our economy really starts careening into a recession, that the American government will start buying bonds. The Fed will start buying bonds and printing more money and will basically dump a bunch of cash into the economy like they did back in 2008 to save us from a depression. And that means the stock market, Bitcoin, gold, all of it is going to go up again. So if you're sitting in the market, it's going to be a great time to buy and make money. But yeah, dude, I'm stoked. I'm talking to an accountant tomorrow. JD Delay is in the chat. Let's go, son. Let's go. We didn't talk about this. JD Delay, good friend of the show, and huge TikToker, by the way. The only people I see more in my TikTok algorithm and in my YouTube Shorts feed than JD Delay is nobody. I see him more than anybody. Maybe Theo Vaughn. Theo Vaughn might be, the guy is a 10 out of 10 in everything and on every platform. JD Delay, what's good, my boy? JD, are you worried about this forced TikTok sale? You should be. You should be, because he's making a lot of money. I know what we make sometimes on a good TikTok month, and I know JD's doing a lot better than that. Which, by the way, that is the thing about the volatility of TikTok is now creators like us. TikTok finds any reason to demonetize us. Like right now, we are completely demonetized off TikTok, and we have to wait a month before we can get remonetized. So I will say TikTok's a little sneaky like that. But for guys like JD, for guys like Ian Bick, for the Connect, it's captured a whole new audience. So what I would tell you, JD, is make hay when the sun shines. While the sun shines, you got about a year to get over 1 million followers, and then who knows what's going to happen. Yeah, it's a wild time. It's the Wild West right now. Yeah, this is crazy, bro. This is crazy. By the way, like and subscribe. Tell me what platform you use. All that good stuff. And come see me on the road. We're going to use this little intermission. We got a few minutes left. We're going to use this little intermission. We're also going to have a Diddy update. There's also a Diddy update. There's also an update on the war in Iran that we're going to get to. The fledgling war with Iran. We're not at war yet. And also, we're going to talk about Ukraine as well. But come see me on the road, you guys. Stand-up comedian Johnny Mitchell will be at the Tempe Improv June 20th. And then June 21st and 22nd, I will be in Dallas, Fort Worth at the Big Laughs Comedy Club. Come out to that. Linktree.com/Johnny Mitchell. If you're a Skanks fan, I will also be at Skank Fest, the greatest comedy festival in the world. That is no cap, as the kids say. That is no hyperbole. It is now the greatest comedy festival on earth. September 27th through 29th. Get tickets. The question is, what is Ukraine going to do with all this money, right? What is Ukraine? We know that it goes to weapons manufacturers and they ship weapons over to Ukraine. But you're not going to tell me that a few $1 billion in cold, hard American cash is not going over to Ukraine as we speak. You're not going to tell me that Zelensky does not have offshore accounts that he is going like this, click, 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 bink, another billion in the Cayman Islands, right? Governor Colonel McGregor said something absolutely chilling the other day. He talked about the government in Afghanistan right before the government fell, right? 2 years ago in 2022, when that was the biggest news, right? When the Taliban finally took back the country, everybody that was in power had to flee, okay? And members of the Afghani government, the puppets that we installed 20 years earlier after we invaded, do you know where they live now? They live in the Beltway, the Washington, D.C. area, in 23 home mansions. This is Afghanistan, where people live on about 50 cents a day in Afghanistan, yet somehow the leaders who fled with suitcases of cash when the Taliban took it back, they now live on the Beltway. Their neighbors are chairman of Lockheed Martin, and their other neighbor is Nancy Pelosi, and Lindsey Graham lives right down the street. It is a cesspool of theft. So no doubt that's where a lot of the money is going. Now, I know that you'll see a headline every now and then, right? Zelensky had to fire his top war cabinet generals for corruption. They need to feed a couple of people every now and then that get out of hand. But I promise you, and by the way, Brian, if you could look this up, there are literally billions of dollars that go missing, like unaccounted for in the accounting of the War Department in America every year. Billions of dollars. Black money. We don't know where it goes. It's completely off the books and unaccounted for, okay? So you think that's not going on in Ukraine? Are you kidding me? Of course it is. It's theft. It's tell me that that's not a Ponzi scheme. We all know what a Ponzi scheme is. A Bernie Madoff pump the stock of a company up, tell investors that they're making a huge return, and meanwhile, they're shuffling cash out the back door. And then the whole thing eventually comes falling down. Tell me how that situation I described, taxpayer money to weapons manufacturers, to lobbyists in Washington, to politicians, to that money then wired over to Zelensky in Ukraine, who then pockets that cash. Tell me how that's not a Ponzi scheme. Brian, do we have any information about the cooking of the books?
So in December, said in its most recent audit, the Pentagon was able to account for just half of its $3.8 trillion in assets.
Oh my God. I way undervalued the theft. Brian, if you didn't hear, just said that in December, the most recent accounting, December of this last year, was it the Pentagon? The Pentagon was unable to account for half of the $3.8 trillion budget. Was it a budget, or what's the $3.8 trillion? $3.8 trillion in assets. That's $1.9 trillion that's missing. The veins in my neck are about to pop. So tell me, Dr. Lovato, my new shrink, how am I a sociopath for doing everything I can to avoid paying tax? Tell me how that is, right? Like, that's, you know what they called, I'm a rule breaker? So am I wrong under God if I am trying to shirk this unjust laws or break unjust, immoral laws? You know who they called rule breakers in the 1980s? the Catholic bishops in South America who practiced resistance against militarism and these military dictatorships that disappeared people from Argentina all the way up to Guatemala. What's up? Okay, wow. This is great producing, Brian. I'm loving what you're doing over here. Am I, Dr. Lovato? Am I 18% sociopath? Okay, I took the sociopath test. I really only have red flags on 2 of the 9 questions, right? Of are you a sociopath? Because believe, after our session, I went and took the are you a sociopath quiz. I only exhibit really 2 factors of sociopathy. One is rage. I've got medium level rage, and then 2 is breaking of rules or law breaking, right? Wow. So this was sent to me just now. This is from Axios. I want to read you this, guys. What to know about the long-range missiles the U.S. quietly gave to Ukraine. The U.S. quietly, and this is from Axios, right? The U.S. quietly shipped a new long-range missile system to Ukraine, which used it to bomb airfields in Russian-occupied territory, according to a Pentagon spokesman. Why it matters. The transfer of the Army tactical missile system marked a major policy shift within the Biden administration, which has so far been wary of giving Ukraine long-range missiles over concerns about escalation. At the same time, Kiev had repeatedly asked the U.S. and other Western countries for long-range capabilities to strike Russian targets in occupied Ukrainian territory. The Pentagon said the U.S. did not announce the transfer in order to maintain operational security for Ukraine at their request. This is not the first time Ukraine has used these long-range missiles. Okay? So basically, what this means is there is an escalation up to the point of provoking what could be nuclear war. This is what I'm getting from this article, is that these long-range missiles are effectively like either taboo or completely outside of international laws of war.
Each one of those is $1.5 million.
And the price tag on these, each one of them is $1.5 million. Yeah, the not only does this escalate a potential war, a hot war between the U.S. and Russia, they each of these missiles cost $1.5 million. You could feed the country of Haiti for a year off of one missile costs. What's up?
The other type of missile they use,
yeah,
is $1.7 billion.
Oh my God! For one missile?
Yeah.
Okay, you know what we do? We keep giving the government of the U.S. too much credit. Some of these missiles cost $1.7 billion. Put a B on that, shorty. $1.7 billion. So here's the thing, and this actually brings up a good point. The $90 billion aid package could be completely false or misleading. It could be triple that. Like the funny money, the funny accounting that we see. I mean, if $1.9 trillion is unaccounted for in the Pentagon, the money that they could be sending to Ukraine could be triple what they're telling us, right? That's what's so crazy. So it's like, oh, but I'm a sociopath for moving my money offshore, so I don't have to give it to these imperialist swine hawks, Dr. Lovato. Which, by the way, I love this guy, though. He's challenging me. He's making me a better person. This package included a requirement for the Biden administration to send more. Wow. So there you go. So Kiev and Zelensky, as part of this aid package, effectively required that these long-range missiles that cost $1.7 billion were included in this aid package, right? So I'm not telling anybody to go break the law or dodge taxes, right? I'm just telling you, do what the wealthy do. Do what the rich do. Fight fire with fire. Use debt because that's a write-off. Put your money into companies and keep your income low and legally figure out how to pay the least amount of tax possible. And now you're saying, Johnny, but doesn't this money go to roads and schools? Yeah. Do you know how many potholes I hit on the way over here? Who cares? Buy a truck. Homeschool your kid. Your kid's going to be learning through AI in a couple of years anyway. And let's face it, you're watching my stream. You don't have any kids. Yeah. So this all, it's not a surprise that this all happens at once. It's not a surprise. You know, the government takes the temperature of the body politic and of guys like Trump who essentially speak for the body politic. Trump embodies the anger and the populist frustration of both sides, the left and the right of this country, right? He has galvanized the simmering frustration of the populace for a long time. And this week, at the beginning of their trial, right? At the beginning of his criminal trial, they saw an opportunity, right? They saw the Teflon Don finally blink. They saw him finally go, oh, I'm tired, right? This Adderall that they give me for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is no longer working, right? And he quacks and he tells Johnson, basically do what you got to do when it comes to this aid package, right? And that was enough to line up the troops, right? And they passed this all at once. A ban on TikTok and the foreign aid bill, right? And the FISA spying bill, all which was rolled into the foreign aid bill, all three of which do not have the approval of the majority of America and Americans, right? These are evil people. They're evil. If they're not evil, they're completely morally corrupt. Dr. Lovato, why aren't you calling Mike Johnson a sociopath? Why aren't you calling Nancy Pelosi a sociopath? Why aren't you calling Lindsey Graham a sociopath? Yes, I sold dope back in the day. Yes, I put my money into the stock market and run it through companies to avoid the maximum tax burden, which is a lot, right? Yet I'm a sociopath. Call me a sociopath. You know what I mean? In my day, we called that a rebel. So I don't like why we Americans have to follow the letter of the law. We Americans have to follow the rules, but you don't. I had a Celsius on the way over here. I had a whole pot of coffee and I had a Celsius. And I had the sounds of Taylor Swift, American Hero, coursing through my very being. And I'm going to yell a little bit. And I'm going to tell you what, next Tuesday morning, when I have my next session with Dr. Lovato, he's going to get a piece of my mind. I am not paying $85 a month for BetterHelp. No, I pay $85 a session, dude. I'm not getting Dr. Lovato rich through paying him $85 a session to hear that because I've made some mistakes and I'm trying to take accountability for it and I'm turning my life over to the Lord and everything that I have, everything that we have truly is from God. And there's tons of evidence of that, physical evidence. If you're one of these annoying atheists, godless, commie atheists that want to argue scientifically about the absence of God. Okay, I can beat that argument back. Man, I don't know where I was going with that. God gives us everything, and He taketh away too. You know what I mean? So, you got to pay the tax man too. And that's gonna, he's gonna get a nice big fat check. I'm not saying I'm not pulling a Brian who went to, I'm not pulling a Wesley Snipes, okay? I'm not going to federal, I'm not just not paying my taxes. There's action being taken. I'm just saying I'm I'm going to avoid the maximum burden that is California state tax, federal income tax, etc., by running my money through companies, you leveraging debt, and potentially buying some real estate. Yeah, it's wild. So even if you think that, okay, we need to stop the Russians, right? Even if you think now what bothers me honestly is that people in one breath will argue against the money that we're giving to Ukraine and the extension of the war in Ukraine, but they'll also say, well, but it's wrong. I totally condemn what the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. I don't know if you can have both. According to what the Russians think, and they're not entirely wrong, the war started in 2014 when Victoria Nuland and Obama overthrew the Ukrainian government and installed a puppet government, along with the encroachment of NATO. Right? So this was actually a defensive strike on Ukraine. I have no love lost. No love lost for Ukraine, even though the chicks are hot and great gymnasts. But, and by the way, Russia has been trying to negotiate. They've been trying to negotiate a peace settlement. That's getting almost impossible now. They were ready to come to the bargaining table with Zelensky back in April of 2022. And Boris Johnson, as we know, was sent by the U.S. State Department to completely tell Ukraine, no, you will not. We'll send you whatever you want. You will, under no circumstances, come to a peaceful settlement. So now Russia has America in the West by the short and curlies. He's like, I'm not pressed to do any of this. You see Putin on state TV the other day? He's laughing at America. Putin is under no rush to come to a settlement now. Not only, and Brian, this is for the YouTube monetization. We're fact checking here. Brian, I believe that Russia's economy grew by 3% this year. Not only do the hundreds of sanctions and the billions of American dollars that we stole from them under the asset freezer not work, but the asset seizure, the freezing of assets, not only did that not work, Russia's economy grew. Not only are they trading robustly amongst the BRICS nations, they're selling their oil to India and China, right? But America's economy contracted, and the West is going into a recession. Germany is in a crisis, an economic crisis that nobody's talking about. So the West, not only is this backfiring on the West, it's making Russia stronger. Am I right about that fact? So it's making Russia and the BRICS nations richer. They're doing better during this war, and it's weakening the West and certainly weakening America, and it's destroying Ukraine. So this is not helping at all. But you could say, well, we need to thwart Russia is an autocracy. It's not a democracy, blah, 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 blah. Well, we know Ukraine is not either, right? Ukraine canceled elections. It's got a draft, all of this stuff. And it's run by people that are stealing money almost at wholesale, right? They're stealing American money and they're sending it offshore. So they're not defending democracy. What democracy? What democracy could we be defending when we are effectively have a TikTok ban and are cracking down on free speech, not only with TikTok, but on college campuses where mostly peaceful protesters are doing sit-ins? And this is why it looks like the 1960s. And trust me, we're bringing it back to this. This is why I'm one of the best in the business, folks. It's called a callback. Again, like the 1960s, you have peaceful protests being tear gassed by militarized police. You have students getting fired. You have college campuses and presidents of colleges like Columbia University cracking down on free speech. You have the right to say whatever you want about Gaza. and about the situation in Israel and Palestine at large. But not if you go to these colleges, right? So you have an assault on free speech, and now you have an assault on the Fourth Amendment. We can spy on you, Americans, through the FISA bill. So what democracy are we protecting when we can't even protect our own democracy? You know, and the most depressing part about this is that I truly don't see how any leader that could get elected is going to change any of this. I don't think Trump is going to win. I think the reason that Trump was so popular, despite his all of these criminal cases, despite all these felonies he's been catching, the reason he has remained so strong in the polls is because he stands by his principles, which are free speech, draining the political military establishment in Washington, and America First policies, right? So what he did with this bill, cucking and dog whistling to Mike Johnson by allowing this bill to go through, his base is going to leave him. Maybe not his hardcore base, but guys like me and many, many other people in the center who see him as basically standing up against the military business lobbying industrial complex in Washington, this oligarchy that is completely making America crumble from the inside, robbing taxpayers, and causing completely unnecessary wars in the Middle East and in Ukraine and Russia. Trump was the guy standing up to all of this. He cracked. And now I don't see how he can win unless he rapidly apologizes for letting this bill go through and goes back to his principles, right? Not that he's a principled guy, but he's saying what the populace wants to hear. That's what populist leaders do. They take the temperature of what the body politic voters want, and they obey. Trump obeys the body politic. He obeys what the majority want. The rest of Washington goes against what the majority want. It's really that simple. So, I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm literally reversing course from what I said like a week ago on this live stream. It is possible that Biden could win. It is possible that Biden could win because not only does Trump have 4 criminal cases and the whole body of the machine, the state media against him, and not only can he now be spied on legally, right, through the FISA bill, he's turned on his principles. So it's like, unless, can Kennedy get it? Now, Brian, can you do me a favor? Can you see what the status is of RFK making it onto the bill, the ballots? Now, I do believe that RFK had a win recently, like a good, like some positive news about his status of being a presidential candidate on the state ballots, but I'm not sure yet. They're going to try everything they can. The Democratic National Committee and these other tyrants are going to do everything they can to ensure that there is no choice, that your choices are Joe Biden or Donald Trump. That's what the whole machine wants, okay? And of course, their plan with that is to make it so there's only 2 candidates and then throw everything they can behind Biden and try to take out Trump. That's the master plan. You got anything over there, Big Red?
He's getting an average of 13% support.
So he's polling at an average of 13% support, according to polls. But what is he doing? Yeah, that ain't too good, right? I mean, we thought it was as high as 30%. This is what I read and heard about a month ago. Now he's only at 13. Again, though, let's not believe polls. But the main thing is, can you vote for him? Is he going to be on a ballot in all 50 states, right? Possibly not, because there's all sorts of trickery and effery, You know what I mean by effery, right? Just trying to keep it clean here. It's a clean program.
I mean, he secured ballot access in Michigan.
So he secured ballot access in Michigan so far. What else is up for contention? What else is being is he had to fight for? What other battleground states is he fighting for? He could win Michigan, by the way.
Utah, Hawaii, Nevada, and New Hampshire.
Utah, Hawaii, Nevada, and New Hampshire. He's still trying to get on the ballot in.
I guess he got on in Utah. But...
Okay, so he recently got on the ballot in Utah, but he's still got a handful of states, some of which are key states that he needs to get on the ballot for. Now, I don't know. It sounds like if he can get on the ballot in Michigan, in Utah, he has a good chance in places like New Hampshire, key states, right? Key swing states. Now, Biden is almost certainly going to lose Michigan because of his continued support for the bombing in Gaza, right? Brian, can you look up what the key states are, the most key battleground states? How is everybody doing? Are you doing good out there? I hope you are. Just know that I love you. Know that the God loves you. Doesn't matter what religion you are, Jewish, Muslim, Christian. I go to Catholic church, and I know that's not a good brand. I know Catholics do not have a good brand. They're like the Boeing 737 of churches, but I grew up on it. I continue to go to it. I'm back after 25 years. I almost weep with joy every Sunday when I'm in there. I love the smell of frankincense. I love the organs. I love the stained glass. There's a lot of it that I find just nostalgic, if nothing else, from my childhood. We got anything on there?
There's a lot of favorites.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, my point is I'm not optimistic about anybody about this election. Like I was optimistic 2 months ago. I thought, a year ago, I was optimistic about RFK. Like I always am about third-party candidates. Like I was optimistic about Bernie Sanders, right? And then I saw the power of the media to slander him, but more importantly, just ignore him, right? And keep him out of the dialogue. So I said, okay, well, I like what Trump's doing. I at least have Trump to vote for. And this was a couple of months ago. And now I'm completely disheartened by his prospects of getting in as well. So, and of course, you see what the Democrats did. They paraded all of the Kennedys in this new ad that they're running. And it's like, I'm voting for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the greatest. This is what a Kennedy said, by the way. This is literally what RFK's kin, like a cousin or, a nephew of RFK, he got on the news and said with a straight face, Joe Biden is the biggest defender of democracy in modern American history. What a slap in the face to your two uncles that were murdered. Robert F. Kennedy and John Jack Kennedy, murdered probably by their own government. And you got the nerve to tell me this guy who said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Wear your mask. People that don't wear masks are going to die. Signed a TikTok ban, a free speech ban, as well as a bill to spy on American citizens. He's the biggest defender of democracy in modern times. Are people under some kind of, is everybody getting paid off, or have people really lost their minds? Like, part of me really thinks that people are drinking the Kool-Aid. That people really, they are so absorbed in the cyclone of their thought bubbles, right? Whatever their algorithm is, that they cannot take a step back and look at facts. I really think that. But what are people looking at? Am I the only one who reads, who watches credible alternative media, and who listens to Taylor Swift? I can't be the only one. It's bananas. Hang on, we've got breaking news from our election correspondent, Brian, Big Red Brian.
Nevada, Arizona.
The key election states, the key swing states in this election are going to be Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. So I think RFK is on the ballot in most of those states, except for which. But look, he needs the numbers, right? So it's like, yes, he's got to win. He's got to win the swing states, but he's also got to get enough electoral votes. So he's got to win. He needs to win he needs to be on all the state ballots, and he needs to win because he needs the stats, right? He's RFK. He's coming in as a major underdog if we're going to believe the polls. Now, look, I know in the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton was winning all polls and Donald Trump smoked her, right? Well, I don't want to say smoked, but beat her. Even though she won the popular vote. So anything could happen. I always take these pre-election polls with big grains of salt, but it's like, RFK needs to step it up. Now's the time. We're 6.5 months, less than 6.5 months out from election day. Do something, bro. Do something. Come on my podcast. Come on my I'm sure that I would be willing to bet that a good 75 to 80% of our viewership does not vote. So perhaps a couple of 100,000 new people may vote for you if you come on my podcast, bro. You got to do something. Step it up, man. Yeah, it's pretty insane. What's up? We're going to wrap in a little bit. We're going to wrap in a few minutes. A friend of mine just asked me, did I get paid for my Fox News appearance? One other one of my friends are arguing about it. I did not. I did not get paid for my Fox News, my primetime interview with Jesse Waters. This new warrantless legislation, 60-34, passed in the Senate. This is Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So again, we all know by now that governments use emergencies to absorb and consolidate their power, to get rid of civil liberties, to attack freedoms in general. We saw this with COVID. We saw this with the Patriot Act after 9/11, the war in Iraq. You go all the way back to Vietnam, and boom, my train of thought came back to me. We are in the reason that I compare, even though I think today we are in a much more dire situation than we were in 1968, the reason that I compare now to the Vietnam era, 1965 to 75, right? But 1968 and 69 was the most contentious year, right? It was the most Americans killed. It was the most protests in America and around the world. It was the heaviest bombing campaign in Vietnam, right? A war that killed 2 million Vietnamese, right? And then, of course, we don't even talk about what Nixon did in places like Laos and Cambodia, where he bombed and killed so many people that they're still stepping on landmines to this day, right? And that was Henry Kissinger. I mean, what they did there were worse war crimes than probably anything that George Bush did in Iraq, right? The worst, by the numbers, atrocities committed and written, signed off on by an American president in history. The reason that I compare today to Vietnam are a couple of things, right? George Bundy wrote to, I believe it was Henry Kissinger, in a letter that's since been intercepted and, stuck in the annals of history. We cannot win in Vietnam, he said. He goes, we probably can't win in Vietnam, but we should go anyways. It's the right thing to do. So in Vietnam, they knew pretty much from the beginning, the War Council, right? Lyndon Baines Johnson, they knew probably from 1965 or 66 that we could not win the war in Vietnam. But for the next 5 to 7 years, and not until 1975 when they left, when Saigon fell, did they stop sending billions of dollars, weapons, and soldiers to their death in Vietnam. Vietnam was so pointless. They would spend days in battle in places like infamous places like Hamburger Hill, where they would just take hills. You see the top of that hill? We're going to take it. Charlie, the enemy, is up there. The Viet Cong is up there, and they would be engaged in gunfights where, scores, hundreds of Americans would die, thousands of Vietnamese would die, and they would finally get to the top of that hill, and then they would say, "Okay, what are we doing here? We're going to go take the next hill." There was no strategy to it. The strategy was to unite Vietnam, and they knew from the beginning they couldn't do that. Because the government of South Vietnam, just like the government in Ukraine, was wildly unpopular, wildly undemocratic, and corrupt, taking hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and putting it in their own pockets, right? Just like Afghanistan, just like Ukraine. So it is entirely possible that behind closed doors, politicians in Washington that grandstand and say the invasion of Ukraine by Russia is the greatest moral atrocity in history, since Hitler's invasion of Poland. We must do everything we can to protect democracy. This is our fight. You have people saying Ukraine is our border, right? Thank you for the super chat. Who threw it in there?
Court killer with a question.
Court killer with a question. Okay, give us a sec, court killer. I'm in the middle of a court killer rant here, comparing Vietnam to Ukraine. They know it's not going to work. They know, and they don't care. Nancy Pelosi knows it's not going to work. Maybe she doesn't because she's so old and her mind is absolute mush. But, people with a little more moral courage and a little more backbone and many more brains who still voted to send money to Ukraine, they know it's unwinnable. Russia has 100 million more people than Ukraine. They can make and better arm themselves than the U.S. I just showed you how their GDP grew by 3% this year. They're not hurting at all. In fact, they're thriving. Putin has never been more popular. He's galvanized. The people have come behind him. The patriotic Russians, you got to give them that. They love Russia. They've come behind him since the invasion. This is an unwinnable war. So just like we were sending our boys to their death and bombing and killing millions of Vietnamese, innocent and guilty, just like we did that, we send weapons to Ukraine to not only to make the oligarchs rich, but sending Ukrainian men to their death, right? And Russians who die too. It's where is the morality? And they do that in the name of Christianity. What era am I living in? I thought I lived in this atheistic, postmodern, post-George Bush, post-Hawk, post-Cold War, post-modern era. An era of logic. I didn't know I lived in the Middle Ages. I didn't know I lived in 13th century England, where you went to die in the Crusades for the glory of God. Are we as bad as the jihadist Muslims who blow themselves up in the name of Islam? Tell me what the difference is in principle. It is insanity, and it will take down the United States. Now, if you're a guy like me who holds Bitcoin and who actively buys Bitcoin, I'm healthily positioned in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. If you're a guy like me that buys gold, and I'm just going to do better with the chaos. I'm cool with the hyperinflation and the implosion of America more or less, even though it's going to make me sad to have to leave and go live in Puerto Rico next to Peter Schiff. Oh, that sounds like a ton of fun. I got to hear why I should buy more gold. Yeah, I talk about a guy that's living in a different century. But anyways, yeah, I own some metal, right? But look it, I'm getting rich off crypto. You're not getting rich off gold, okay? What century am I living in? These are the people that run the country. People that talk and think like war hawks from 1952. So we're living in so this is why I compare today to 1968. We have massive political polarization, huge protests. Nobody believes the government. People are furious. Don't trust anybody over 30. That's what the kids said back in the 60s, right? It is the era of protesting. It's the era of inflation. It's the era of debt. It's the era of war crimes. It's the era of bombings. You guys gotta, I really heat up towards the end of these rants. At the beginning, I'm a little off, talking about Taylor Swift, but by the end, I'm doing my full Alex Jones, right? But it's also the era of incredible opportunity. And what is going to save us is the thing that's also going to potentially kill us. And that's AI. That's artificial intelligence. That not only are they going to save the irreversible population decline of the West, but they're going to make people that invest in that stuff, like me and my staff, aka Big Red Brian, here at the Connect, very rich because they go up, their assets and the value of their companies go up the more that the West and the hawks bring us to ruin. Let's get to that super chat, buddy.
What do you think about the Blue 49 Dragon Tooth mines used in Vietnam?
The Blue 42 Dragon Tooth, the Blue 43 Dragon Tooth mines that were used in Vietnam. Brian, can you look up what those are for me? I assume they're landmines of some kind.
Airdrop cluster type landmines used by the United States in the Vietnam War. It was chemically activated.
So is that the Agent Orange?
And has a relative low explosive content, typically maiming rather than killing.
Right. So the Blue 43 Dragon Tooth mines were cluster bombs that the U.S., just carpeted Vietnam with. They tended to maim and not kill. Hey, it wasn't just the Bluetooth 43, buddy. Agent Orange, napalm, pictures of little, I'm going to cry. Pictures of little naked Vietnamese children screaming as their skin burned. Have we forgotten this? But I'm the sociopath, Dr. Lovato. Have we forgotten these things? These are war crimes. But as we've seen, the only people that don't care about international law are not Iran, are not Russia, are not China. They're the United States, Israel, and Britain, and France. France voted for it, but France is irrelevant, okay? It's the West that want war. It's the West that want the funk. It's the West that would rather betray the principles of capitalism and free markets and democracy in place of corporatism, cronyism, imperialism, violation of human rights. But it can't stand because this is a world of God. Might doesn't make right. Might doesn't make right. Whether that's Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Henry Kissinger, Richard Nixon, Pol Pot, to Oliver North, to George Bush, to Joe Biden. Might doesn't make right. Everybody ends up where they deserve at the end. Okay? And look, let this relate to your personal life too. If you're out there cheating, doing bad, you will get caught. If you're out there cheating on your taxes, you will get caught. But trust me, the rich made up the tax laws. There's a lot of ways to get around them to minimize your tax burden, right? So yeah, I mean, that's what I think about the Blue 43 Dragon Tooth bombs. Inhumane. Again, by 1968, 69, when the bombing campaigns really became, on levels we've never seen. They've dropped more bombs. And Brian, if you could look this up real quick, we'll get out of here in a second. I believe they've dropped more bombs in Vietnam than in all of World War II. And
that's true, but Laos still has the record.
And Laos, right? Poor Laos. I mean, God, they got like
The secret war.
that was just that. I mean, they were the petri dish for Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger's sickening little experiment, right? And I believe they've dropped more bombs on Gaza now than in Vietnam. I could be wrong about that. Every war they keep ratcheting up the insanity and the cruelty, but my point is the weapons manufacturing industry, what Eisenhower warned of as the military-industrial complex, that was all already hugely influential during the Vietnam War and the Vietnam War era. So people are getting paid out of that too. So basically, since the end of World War II, the what I've described is the military-industrial lobbyist, corporate lobbyist complex, right? The people who buy off politicians, these politicians who then get out and sit on the boards of weapons companies like Lockheed Martin, et cetera, and on and on and on, right? The money that they ship, the taxpayer money that they ship to places that we're invading, whether that be Israel or Ukraine, Russia, Vietnam. This has all been going on since the end of World War II. So there's people are getting rich off war. They basically always have, right? So there really has not been a just war since World War II. World War I, the Great War, that was a completely unnecessary war. That was a war that crippled Britain. In 1914, Great Britain was the most prosperous country in the world. I mean, if you go back and look at the stats, dude, it was like everybody was eating good. People were getting fresh milk delivered to their door every day. GDP was high. Their exports were high. The middle class was robust. They were doing better than the United States was doing. And then they got involved in the Great War. Completely unnecessary. They haven't turned it around ever since. The UK has been doing bad since I was a kid, right? They're just struggling to hold on to some semblance of a great power, a great economy, which they're not. They're constantly running a high debt. They constantly have high unemployment. They're however bad the US is doing, the UK is doing 2 times worse. So the US is headed for something that looks like what the UK is now. Massive unemployment, huge amounts of poverty, huge chasms between the wealthy and the poor, completely disappearing middle class, inflation that's running red hot, rampant refugees, no border, people living on the streets. This is whatever's going on in the US, it's happening worse in the UK, but we're headed there. And it's because they went to war. It's because their already fading empire in 1914 extended themselves too thin, right? This is the formula for how Rome falls. And, people have written massive books studying such things. It's money printing, inflation, the chasm between the rich and the poor, and unnecessary foreign wars, which exacerbates all that and makes it all fall apart, right? And it's politicians who know it, like our politicians, and what they're doing is it's a money grab. They're saying, get it while it's good. Make hay while the sun shines, right? Because this business is a fire sale. It's going out of business. Take anything you want. So, God bless the oppressed. God bless the boy who thinks with his own mind. And, God bless you for listening. Do we have anything else do we have any other pressing questions we must get to before we get out of here? No. So yeah, you guys, a couple of stock tips. I would look at Tesla. If Tesla goes down to 130, it was up 12% today. Boy, we've just gone from, political podcast to Johnny's stock tips. I would look at Tesla. Tesla will be a good buy. I don't think it's going to go back down to 50 like it did earlier this year, beginning of end of last year. But if it goes down to about 130, I'm buying. I'm bullish on Tesla in the long term and their AI technology. That's a good pickup. Bitcoin was down. All crypto across the board was down. Hang in there, baby. By May, they say, it's by May that the government is going to step in and start buying federal bonds again, or the Fed is going to start buying U.S. Treasuries, bonds, and that will trigger money printing. So if you work for a wage, your life stinks. Inflation is going to get hotter. It's going to keep hurting. So start buying inflation hedges, and just know that the stock market is going to rally, and with it, crypto and Bitcoin, because of the money printing, and ultimately because of the decline in the empire. There's money to be made, right? That is the beautiful thing about this system that we have set up, and about capitalism and technology. There will always be winners. So in this decline of Rome, be the winner. There will be a lot of losers. Be on the winning side. Okay. Take advantage, do damage and take advantage. Follow me. Come see me live. Go to linktree.com/Johnny from Mitchell for my dates. I love all you guys. We'll see you on the next live. Take care. Peace out.